So let's take a moment to talk about it to try to understand the foundation of prejudice, where it comes from, why we still hold on to it in today's world, what its origins are, and some of its characteristics. This way, we can reflect on how to position ourselves better in life and engage in self-criticism. Have I ever been prejudiced against someone or something at any point in my life? It is important for us to recognize whether we have any tendency to judge in a hasty manner and take a stance for or against something we do not truly know. This is precisely what we will see. That is the origin of the word prejudice. In other words, to prejudge, to form an opinion about something before having the opportunity to truly understand it. It means placing an artificial barrier or favoritism that is not based on logic, clarity, or any real foundation. Welcome, everyone. I hope we have a pleasant time together this afternoon discussing a topic that is delicate, but perhaps one of the most important from a philosophical perspective. It is something almost archaic, nearly prehistoric, that we still carry with us. It would be like a dinosaur that keeps roaming the streets in modern times. Despite all the progress humanity has made in so many fields, and it still persists prejudice. Let's talk about prejudice, which is one of the deep scourges of humanity. It has caused more genocides than any virus ever could. It has taken more lives throughout history than any war ever could. Therefore, it is a delicate and serious issue, extremely serious. Prejudice comes from the root word I mentioned to you, the prefix pre- combined with conceptus, meaning preconceived notion. And this evidently is what we have already discussed, forming a preconceived notion. Hastily assigning something, attributing a value to something. Express judgment before a sober and clear understanding is reached. In other words, before thinking and evaluating with sound judgment. And I say that prejudice is always negative. But you might ask me, isn't it possible to have a positive prejudice? For example, before getting to know someone, assuming that they are a very good person, or believing that a group of people are very good, it is possible. Although it is somewhat rare, I don't recall ever seeing it happen. As a possibility, it exists. A positive prejudice is possible. However, since it is still a prejudice, meaning you are making a judgment without any real basis, it remains negative. Let's say I have a positive prejudice and I expect a lot from a group or an individual. I will create an expectation that pressures this person to live up to it. Many times, they do not. We are flawed individuals. We have weaknesses. Therefore, prejudice, even when positive, creates the possibility of imposing our expectations on someone and ultimately leading to disappointment. And sometimes it shifts in the opposite direction. What was once positive turns negative. Before we have the possibility to consciously and clearly analyze something, we should not form any judgment. Some might even say not even afterward. We should only judge what is within our responsibility to judge. Criticism and judgment are inherently negative attitudes. Now, doing so without any foundation, without even basic knowledge, is even worse. And the justifications we create for doing this are even more concerning. They always revolve around some form of personalism. We will discuss this further ahead. The origin of all prejudices. Do you know where it comes from? Have you ever stopped to think about it? Where do all prejudices originate? All of them, every single one. They stem from something called personalistic prejudice. I close my eyes and think, all my attributes are better than those of others. Then I open my eyes. I will look at my skin color, my nationality, my sexual orientation, everything, my religion, everything about me, and I will say, I am superior to what others are. Therefore, as long as this selfishness prevails within us, the belief that our own attributes are superior to those of others, we will never truly be able to combat selfishness. As long as we believe that our own personality is something special and superior within the framework of human life, within the framework of humanity, we will not only continue to fuel existing prejudices, but also create new ones. We will always be very creative, constantly inventing new prejudices. And this war will never end. Eternally, we will always be discriminating against some group. And sometimes the group that is discriminated against develops a sense of vengeance and wants to turn the tables. And then a two-way prejudice begins, coming from both sides. And this never ends. It is, more or less, the story of humanity is what we live. What could we do to let go of this presumption that I am better than everyone else? On what is this presumption based? Why do I think this way? So, there are many things we can consider and reflect upon to understand where prejudice comes from. It can stem from generalizations, particularizations, or unfounded and fanatical convictions. What are generalizations? I met a person, let's say, a French person, and this person was not a good person, did not have very good character. What conclusion did I reach? That the French are no good, because I met one who was not very good. This type of generalization is very common. It leads to terrible prejudices. I met one person, I met two, who, by chance, were not exactly what I expected from them. Sometimes my judgment wasn't even that fair. From that, I generalized to an entire nationality, to an entire group of people, sometimes even to an entire family. This person is not good, so their whole family must not be good either. This is generalization. Sometimes particularization also happens, which is the opposite. The Germans created Nazism, practiced Nazism. They were the ones responsible for this event in history. Therefore, Nazism is in the past. It has ended. It no longer exists. Yet, to this day, I look with suspicion at any German who appears before me. What does this mean? I project a distorted perception onto a person standing before me, someone who has absolutely nothing to do with it, but shares the same nationality. This exists around the world. Today, for people living in Germany who witness this, there are still individuals who hold prejudice against those of German nationality due to the trauma of Nazism. This still exists, as unbelievable as it may seem. In other words, particularizations, generalizations, or another aspect I mentioned, fanatical and unfounded convictions. I believe in something, whether from a religious or political perspective, and I am convinced that what I agree with, what I adopt, is the absolute truth. Therefore, anyone who comes along is either with me or against me. How curious it is that a human being feels like the owner of absolute truth, while not being even slightly interested in what truth actually is. There is no commitment to it at all. How can someone believe that their opinion is an absolute truth? There is something beautiful that we could imagine. Whatever your opinion may be, whatever your point of view, I respect it, because I am owner of no absolute truth. That would be fair, that would be human. But we constantly arm ourselves with religious, political, and other views. That grants us a sense of superiority. My beliefs are superior. Therefore, anyone who is different, who does not follow the same line of beliefs as I do, is against me. This has also been a source of great prejudices of all kinds throughout history. Every generalization hides the laziness to think. Isn't that so? It becomes so easy. We start dividing life into categories. People who follow this religion are no good. People with this skin color are no good. People with this sexual orientation are no good. It becomes so easy, life all compartmentalized with labels. Very easy, yet absolutely false. Absolutely false. We must take the effort to get to know each human being, one by one, with goodwill. The willingness and enthusiasm to see the best in that person, one by one. There is nothing that can spare you from the effort of getting to know a human being one by one. No kind of prediction or assumption will work. Human beings are incredibly surprising, everyone. Very surprising. Within any category you create, you will find people who are completely different from one another. In other words, this idea of wanting to categorize life does not work. It seems simple, right? It makes things easier. Because then there is just a small group of people I should trust, and the rest I shouldn't. Life becomes very practical, but that is sheer foolishness. It does not work that way. Life is not that simple. And every human being, as Emperor Marcus Aurelius once said, is a unique and unrepeatable universe with whom I have failed to connect. Each person possesses something absolutely unique, regardless of the superficialities I have chosen to justify my prejudice. This can give rise to historical hatreds and even justify genocides. Being prejudiced with power is enough. Many times, hatred toward a people lingers throughout history. We have had this, for example, in relation to the Jews throughout the Middle Ages. Hatred can often perpetuate itself and be passed down. I don't know why. One generation inherits it from the previous one without questioning why, and the next inherits it without questioning why either. This keeps dragging on, sometimes for an enormous amount of time, sometimes even on a smaller scale, in a micro sense, between two families. You may have heard or know this story, how Luiz Gonzaga managed to bring peace between two feuding families in the northeast of Brazil. These families had been killing each other for over a century. Have you ever heard this story? One day, long ago, a person from one family killed someone from the other family. Then they kept avenging each other, back and forth, generation after generation, and this cycle continued endlessly. He managed to carry out the work of reconciliation and put an end to this historical hatred. Sometimes prejudice gives rise to something that drags on throughout history, stretching over time without any real foundation. There is a story that I really like. It doesn't quite fit this context, but I find it funny and interesting, and I think it fits well here. Have you ever heard the story about the ends of the bread? There was a lady who, every time she served bread, would cut off the ends. Her husband found that amusing, right? Well, strange. Why does she do that? One day I'll ask. Then, one day, he asked, why do you cut off the ends of the bread? She said, you know what? I don't know. It was my mother. My mother always cut off the ends of the bread. Let's go ask her. So they went and asked her mother, Mom, why did you do that? My daughter, you know what? I don't know either, because your grandmother always did that. Grandma is still alive. Let's go. Let's clear this up. Let's ask her. So they went and asked Grandma, why did you always cut off the ends of the bread? My dear, because my oven was small. Do you realize what it means to carry on something for generations without ever questioning its purpose? Sometimes prejudice is perpetuated in the same way. The past generation didn't like something, so this one does not like it either. And the next one won't like it either. But why don't we like it? Does anyone know? I don't know. It seems like we have never liked it, so why would we start liking it now? It is something completely baseless at this point. And this can truly be passed down for generations throughout history. And when a fanatic goes on and gains power, someone who knows how to persuade the people and manipulate public opinion, this leads to historical disasters, as has already happened in the past and remains a risk for the future, because we still face serious challenges in coexistence. At a certain point, an entire nation is deemed worthless. We must destroy it, invade it, remove it from existence. We continue to live this reality. It is an archaic mechanism, a form of prejudice that we should have already discarded as something outdated. Yet it continues to operate and thrive at full force in our present world, in our current society. So, take a close look. This can be instilled in a people as a counterpart to an exaggerated nationalism. It is crucial that we understand the difference between patriotism and blind nationalism. Patriotism is one thing that is healthy. I love my family, I love my city, I love my country. I take pride in what I have, but I do not consider myself superior to anyone. I am also willing to appreciate what others have. It is something healthy. It is a way to extend your sense of love and goodwill toward others until it embraces all of humanity. There is nothing wrong with that. However, when patriotism turns into jingoism, it becomes the idea that we are the best in the world. Everyone is inferior to us. And for some inexplicable reason, certain prejudiced individuals, some fanatics throughout history, have managed to instill this notion in their people. The belief that it is an injustice that we don't dominate the world because we are the best. Everyone else is inferior. If everyone were under our command, everything would be much better. We have the best forms of government, the best of this, that, and everything else. And this has not stopped either. Do not think that I am only talking about things from the past. Even today, there have nations that consider themselves the best in the world and seek to impose their worldview on others in a very subtle, very disguised manner. But this is still being done. This kind of mindset is a machine for generating disasters. Every time in history that it has been applied, it has led to disasters. It has resulted in genocides, in acts of extreme cruelty, and it is still something that can happen. This possibility still exists. In other words, a destructive machine that continues to operate. It may even be tied to a feeling of revenge. So, many times throughout history, a country, for some reason, feels wronged by another or a family. They feel wronged by another, and a process begins where they seek revenge for what happened. We eternally want to take revenge to get even. And this will lead to a process of prejudice, which is what we call vindictiveness. I was discriminated against. Now I discriminate to settle the score with these people, to make this family pay for it. And then it becomes a back and forth that never ends. If you disagree with prejudice, if you have been affected by it, do not respond with prejudice against your aggressor, because otherwise it will never end. We keep reversing prejudice from one side to the other. This is what we call vindictiveness, which we will discuss. This has no end. Often, it comes with a feeling of vengeance. It can give rise to vindictiveness that are equally harmful. This is interesting because, at times, we don't fully grasp this concept in society. It is unjust for one particular group to discriminate against another. But how so? Because it was a historical discrimination that has existed for a long time, we start to believe that those who are discriminated against now have the right to discriminate against their oppressors. We think it is fair for them to reverse this prejudice. So it becomes whites against blacks, blacks against whites, homosexuals against heterosexuals, heterosexuals against homosexuals, but it is never really end. A cycle of retaliation where we keep returning prejudice instead of abolishing it. And this will only keep the cycle going, allowing it to continue. At some point, we must say, I have suffered, but as far as I am concerned, no one else will suffer because of me. Because prejudice is a weapon I refuse to wield. I will never judge someone prematurely and begin to discriminate against them in any way. Not because of this. Someone has to put an end to it. This must be abolished. Otherwise, the cycle will just continue. Prejudice is neither better nor worse, depending on whether it comes from A to B or from B to A. It is the same thing. Understand this. And it is essential that we remain aware of this. Because one day we will have to dismantle this mechanism. And it is important that we engage in this process, starting now continuing. At its core, as always, lies selfishness. The self is superior to the non-self. As we mentioned at the beginning, everything related to my identity holds a status of superiority. My beliefs, my way of life, my skin, my sexual orientation, my religion, whatever it may be. Everything concerning the self is seen as superior to the non-self. And this is something that, at some point, all of us experience. A little vanity in believing that, in some way, you know more than someone else, that, in some aspect, you hold a greater claim to the truth than another person. Know that this is the seed of prejudice. This is the seed of prejudice. The ideal, from a philosophical perspective, is for human beings to adopt the mindset of a learner, to understand that each of us carries a mystery within. So every person who crosses our path engages in an exchange on a thesis, antithesis, and synthesis. In other words, a dialectic where both emerge enriched. You offer me a perspective on reality that I do not have. If I learn from you, I will see the world from a new point of view. And I offer you mine. We both grow because I understand that I do not hold the absolute truth. None at all. Therefore, with every human being I encounter, I will grow, I will learn. This is healthy. This would be natural. This would lead to an ever-expanding awareness. From the moment we entrench ourselves and consider ourselves superior in any way, the wheel of prejudice begins to turn. I find it interesting and it works. Don't just think about the well-known categories such as racial prejudice or prejudice based on sexual orientation. Sometimes there are small things. A person with a higher education degree may consider themselves superior because, after all, their degree is called higher education. Isn't it? A person born in a place with a higher per capita income than another. So they think I am better because I was born in a wealthier place. In short, it arises from everything. Human creativity is vast. We discriminate over the most basic things. I remember once, we work with volunteering. As we have mentioned before, we organized a folk festival in Asa Norte at Aixeo do Laser in Brasilia. And by chance, we invited a group of capoeira performers from the neighborhood Guara to perform when they arrived. There was a huge conflict because the capoeira group from Asa Norte refused to allow the group from Guara to perform there. In other words, just the fact that you are from Asa Norte and am from Guara was enough to discriminate against each other. I never imagined that something like this could exist at this level. There is. That is how it is. It is about territory. It is as if we were small animals marking our space, and you are not allowed to enter. Prejudice is absolutely dehumanizing and astonishing in the creativity with which it is constructed. At every moment, in all situations, feeling like the owner of some absolute truth or superior to someone else. No one measures another person's resilience and determination. You may encounter someone who, at this very moment, is facing extremely difficult circumstances, financial struggles, family issues, or simply going through a tough time, while your own life might be relatively stable and balanced. Now, the human being is truly astonishing. In an instant, that person channels determination, gathers strength, and accelerates at such a speed that you can't even catch a glimpse. That is how human beings are unpredictable and remarkable. You should never assume that someone facing a more difficult situation than yours will remain there forever. In the future, they may find themselves in a far more favorable position than you. The human being is full of possibilities, and they can and often do surprise us, going beyond of what we expect. And this is a fact as long as we take the time to observe. One of the most futile tasks is trying to label a human being. The human being does not fit into any label. We are extremely unpredictable and full of surprises. Therefore, do not dare to think that someone, for any reason, is inferior to you, because such a notion does not exist. Nor should you believe that any truth you hold is the only truth. I am the sole owner on that truth. It is curious because those who believe they own the truth are often the very ones who have no real interest in seeking it. And I find that fascinating because true seekers of truth are, above all, humble. They understand that they possess only a fraction, a mere speck of dust. Knows that the path ahead is vast. Those who love truth and seek it are profoundly humble. On the other hand, those who believe they own the truth often have none at all, nor do they care to understand what it truly is. Perhaps they do not even believe it exists. This is a very intriguing aspect. Those who think they own the truth do not learn. Plato spoke about this. He stated that the greatest obstacle to learning, to education, is the belief that one already knows. Those who think they already know will learn absolutely nothing. Our society is filled with groups, with people who believe they already possess knowledge and are no longer willing to learn. This is quite fascinating. So, the greatest obstacle to our growth is believing that we already know everything. Thinking that everything I need to know is already within me. That anything coming from the outside is inferior. How can we come to believe something like that? So irrational very indeed, yet we still believe it. That we possess the truth to a greater degree than others. What would make one person superior to another? Values. And prejudice is incompatible with values. We can say that one person is in a better situation than another when one is just and the other is unjust. When one is upright and the other is corrupt. When one is honest and the other dishonest. We can say that there is a difference in conditions. The conditions here are worse than there. But we cannot label people because this is merely a snapshot of this moment. This can change tremendously over time. And one who upholds values is not prejudiced. A just person will never consider themselves superior to anyone. A fraternal person will never consider themselves superior to anyone. In other words, the one who possesses values is the least likely to discriminate. Discrimination comes from the superficial, from those who knows nothing, neither about themselves nor about others, beyond what is merely skin deep. Those who lack values are the ones who discriminate the most. Someone with values does not act with prejudice. You will not see a just person being prejudiced, nor will you see an individual of integrity being prejudiced. Values are the antithesis of prejudice. The more human values we cultivate, the more we leave prejudice behind. All the reasons that support prejudice are merely superficial details, lacking true significance. What makes a person special in our lives? Wow, is someone who speaks with such depth in their words, and their words are so beautiful. They have the ability to touch exactly the point I need to hear. They have the ability to analyze life in a very beautiful way. She has an ability to respond to life's challenges with great dignity. You realize that what creates deep bonds of love are profound things. They are not merely at a surface level. No one truly likes or dislikes someone because of trivial details in life. Superficial details. So-and-so has such and such skin color. What do you mean? So what? That is just a detail. Someone has a certain sexual orientation. That is a detail. That neither creates nor breaks bonds. No one has a true connection with someone because of these things, nor drift apart because of them. It almost becomes a bit comical. If you think about it, I am not sure if you have ever seen this, a Pantone chart of all human skin tones. You would have to determine at what point one becomes superior or inferior. That is ridiculous. Imagine that this person standing at the boundary gets a bit of sun and suddenly they are considered inferior. That is completely unfounded, absurd, truly absurd. And these things neither create nor break bonds. What truly connects us is who we are at our core. It is said that every profound person is free from prejudice. Prejudice is a sign of superficiality. The one who is overly sensitive, fixated on aspects of another person's life that should merely be details, things that concern only that individual, only them. It has nothing to do with me. And this fixation on such details means that they see only that. They see nothing else. Beyond that, in other words, they are a superficial person. And such a superficial person is incapable of forming deep bonds with anyone. Whoever knows themselves, others, and life with even a minimal depth breaks through the superficial layer of prejudice. Exactly that. Those who have an inner life, who cultivate the habit of reflection, who seek to understand humanity by starting with themselves, such individuals will not be prejudiced. They understand what is truly valuable, what matters, what makes a difference. Economic prejudice. That is another interesting point. For someone to consider themselves superior to another just because they have better economic conditions. It is quite curious because if you look at human history, statistically speaking, the people who made a difference, those who created great inventions, remarkable works of art, and accomplished noteworthy things were, for the most part, not individuals with vast material resources. Isn't that true? It is truth. In large part, yes. Some were even extremely deprived of material possessions, like Epictetus, for example, who was a slave and did not even own himself. So, what does it really mean for someone to have financial wealth in their pocket? If that is what gives you value, then it means the value belongs to the money in your pocket, not to you. That has nothing to do with you. It is the value of the things you own, not your own value. Without them, you are nothing. Therefore, this is yet another form of discrimination that is absolutely absurd and unfounded. It has never been on this basis that humanity made history. Humanity made history through real values, human values, not financial ones. Therefore, this does not make it easier for you to have true value. It does not give you an advantage in terms of possessing human worth. They are mere circumstances, superficial, and highly changeable, in fact, dash. What makes me think that my ideas are superior to those of others? Imagine a person who seeks the truth. What is truth? What is truth? Imagine that things have an intrinsic value, that they exist in and of themselves, independent of what you think about them or what you project onto them. Imagine a universe in which human beings did not exist. Even so, things would still be here and would have meaning, value, and essence. Things have an intrinsic value. It is not we who create them. Seeking to understand the intrinsic value of things, refusing to make them mere reflections of ourselves, our projections onto them, is the pursuit of truth. I don't know if you realize it, but this is constant. I project what I like, what I dislike, what pleases and displeases me onto my judgment of things. So, when things resemble what I like, I consider them to be good. When they do not resemble what I like, I consider them to be bad. I do not see things as they are. I see my own reflection projected onto them. We are so superficial that each of us invents our own truth, according to their tastes and their point of view, according to their whims. To love the truth is to seek to know things as they truly are, independent of my own projections onto them. Do you remember that passage from the song by Caetano Veloso, where he says that Narcissus finds ugly what is not a mirror? And we are like that. Everything becomes a mirror of ourselves. Things become superior or inferior based on whether I like or dislike them, even though my taste isn't necessarily that refined. Yet I judge the world based on this. And everything turns into my shadow. What are things, truly? Ultimately, beyond my own projections onto them, there's this profound curiosity, the desire to understand the essence of things as they are, without mirroring myself in them. What is life? What is time? What are we doing here? What is the meaning of everything that exists here? Where do we want to go? Where with all of this? There are people who have an immense thirst to find this truth. The philosophical nature is one of love for wisdom, love for truth. It is the desire to seek and understand things as they truly are, rather than making them a projection of myself. If you have love for truth, we could. Perhaps we could say that the one who has advanced a little further toward the truth is in a slightly better condition than the one who has advanced less. If we could even measure this, I don't know how we would measure it. Now, most people who believe they own the truth are not actually concerned with the truth at all. They have never stopped to think about what things truly are in themselves, nor are they interested in doing so. I use this expression here. Do not try to prove to me that your thinking has a foundation. I don't believe in foundations. Something like that. Why is something the way it is? Why does a certain group have no value? Because I believe it does not. And what is your belief based on? It doesn't matter. My belief is based on what I think. And that's it. But let's examine the foundations of your belief. That doesn't matter. I don't want to know what foundations are. What matters is that I think this way. That's it. Isn't that the case? If you say, well, this has nothing to do with truth. Truth doesn't exist. Everyone has their own. This kind of thinking makes life chaotic. Absolutely chaotic. A person who has humility and believes that things exist in themselves, independently of them, and seeks to get closer to the mystery of things will, evidently, not be someone who discriminates or builds false foundations to judge others. What I find most curious is this, the attitude of, I don't know, I don't want to know, and I resent those who do. I don't know what the truth is, I don't want to know, and I resent those who do. It doesn't exist for me. What exists is my opinion, and it is absolute. Truth, everyone has their own, and there is nothing absolute in the world. Therefore, my truth is just as valid as yours. I don't want to know the foundations of your thinking. I am not interested in foundations. I believe in this, and that's it. Let's be honest. Let us be truly courageous. Is this, or is this not the foundation of thought in the historical moment we are living in? Do you come across many true seekers of truth, free from vanity and selfishness? Is that something common to find? When someone says, I love the truth, whether they are a contemporary of mine or a historical figure, I am truly impressed. Wow, how wonderful. That person must have broken free from the bubble of their selfishness and vanity. Because to love the truth means stepping away from my personalistic habit of coloring things according to my own preferences. And instead, I begin to seek what things truly are in themselves. That is rare, and that is the foundation of prejudice. If we had any love for the truth, prejudice would not exist. Because then we would have a common foundation in our thinking, which is the essence of the things around us. The ability we have to move forward by understanding the world as it truly is, rather than as we project it to be. If we shared this in common, prejudice would not exist. What makes me believe that a particular race, sexual orientation, or nationality is inherently more capable of providing better answers to life than others? Remember that biblical phrase, by your works, I will know you. That is a fact. You know a person by the way they respond to life. Put them in the face of difficulty and see how they handle it. Observe whether they react with sheer violence, without considering anyone else, whether they panic or whether they are able to stay in control, to navigate the situation intelligently, and to think about bringing others along with them. By the way one reacts to life's adversities, you can see who they truly are. That is when they will rely on their character, their values, and that is when you truly see who they are. By the way they respond to life's circumstances. Who can claim that any sexual orientation, any race, any skin color, any religion, or anything else makes certain human beings respond to life better than others? That is ridiculous. The truth is that only a few from any group within humanity have such an admirable response to circumstances. The idea is that we should always be learning and always emerging a little better. That we should learn from difficulties and come out of them with dignity, improving each time. But this has nothing to do with any superficial classification. We can never claim that any particular group within humanity has better responses to life than another, because, in truth, this varies from one human being to another. What constitutes a good response to life? We must reflect on this and exit with honor, with dignity, with fraternity. This is a truly human response. How many are capable of practicing it? How many are capable of responding to life with human dignity? How many are there? And is this tied to any specific group? Or is it something universal to humanity? Of course, this is not tied to any specific group. It is connected to the level of maturity, values, responsibility, and self-knowledge that a human being possesses, regardless of any superficial circumstances. Therefore, in this regard, there is also no basis for prejudice. None at all. No foundation whatsoever. We see people from the most diverse backgrounds offering profoundly dignified responses to life, and people from the most diverse backgrounds offering undignified responses to life. Both things happen. There is no inherent difference there. Therefore, we begin to see that we are dismantling all the foundations of prejudice. Where does it stand? It has no ground to stand on. There is no foundation for it. And what else? Does feeling like a better human being than another make one more human? Does the fact that I feel superior truly grant me any real quality? What does it mean to be a better human being? Most of the time, people don't even think about this. Imagine, and this is something I often mention in my lectures, imagine that there is a pyramid, and on this pyramid, each person ascends through a different face, countless faces, each according to their own nature. But at the apex, everyone meets. The pinnacle of human evolution, the most complete human being we can possibly envision. What would this human being be like? They would be endowed with values, virtues, and wisdom. Do you agree with me? A person of tremendous worth, virtue, and wisdom. This is the pinnacle of humanity's evolution. Can we say that someone, some group, or some category is progressing toward this faster than others? Or is this an entirely individual matter? It is entirely individual. It does not conform to any category. In other words, your stance does not qualify you as a human being, quite the opposite, in fact. Since values are the opposite of prejudice, by holding a prejudice, you place yourself in an inferior position compared to someone who does not. Indeed, values are the complete antithesis of prejudices. By considering yourself superior, you're actually declaring yourself inferior. Automatically. It may be implied, but you're not seeing it. Because if you truly had values, you would not adopt prejudices. So, it is a declaration of inferiority when you feel superior to anything or anyone. Moving forward in imagination exercise. It is important for us to engage in this exercise, to put ourselves in someone else's place and understand the harm we may cause. The harm of feeling discriminated against and recognizing the blow of violence that this represents. Condemned to discrimination for something beyond your control, the circumstances of your birth, the identity to which you belong, feeling discriminated against and violated in your most fundamental characteristics. The pain this causes is immense. And often, historically, peoples who have been heavily discriminated against over time may, at some point, develop an inferiority complex, as if they were devoid of value. How absurd! How could someone be devoid of value? What is value? Why would anyone be stripped of their value? Every human being, regardless of their place in humanity, has the potential to produce precious contributions, both in the physical and metaphysical realms. Any human being, regardless of sexual orientation, skin color, nationality, or religion, just consider whether this person is not capable of creating wonderful things in science and art. From a physical perspective, and also on a metaphysical level, they can embody remarkable values and an admirable way of living. In other words, any human being from any group has the ability to produce precious contributions. And this is where the notion of value comes from. Why would someone have less value than another? How do we measure this? Based on what? No one has less value than another just because a certain prejudice dictates it. That is pure arbitrariness. In general, arbitrariness is synonymous with inferiority. So it is important that we recognize this, the impact we have, the pain this must cause. Recently, I read a news story, perhaps you saw it too, about a young Brazilian boy who, in a Portuguese city, was put in a headlock by a schoolmate because he was Black. Do you realize what it means for a 6-year-old child to go through something like that? Imagine what it is like to live with such a stigma for no reason, without any justification. How can human beings do this to one another? How can they do this? It is absurd. It is completely senseless. If we took the time to reflect, to think, to base our actions on reason, prejudice would be wiped from the world. But we behave like irrational animals. And prejudice is a product of this irrationality, this brute, animalistic nature. A little reflection, a little sense of values of humanity would be enough for us to banish prejudice among us. But we remain in inertia, clinging to what has always been done, to what has always been thought, especially because this inertia becomes comfortable. It is very easy, without doing anything, to feel superior to someone else. A superiority granted effortlessly, so it becomes convenient. Thus, due to inertia and poorly processed instincts, a sense of animality, this continues to persist within humanity. Even a minimal amount of reflection would be enough to eliminate this among people, because there is no justification from any perspective we might analyze. So, moving forward, creating a culture, this is something increasingly important for us to pursue. To establish a culture where every form of prejudice is immediately recognized as an absolute declaration of stupidity and ignorance. Any form of prejudice would immediately serve as a classification. I find it amusing how human beings know how to manipulate opinions. This is very common today, especially in the media, where they know how to steer collective opinion. They work with this skillfully. I don't know if you remember when the anti-smoking campaign first started. I remember an advertisement that featured a woman dressed in a dreadful way, smoking with the slogan, "Smoking is tacky." That image, that woman dressed in the most bizarre and awful manner possible, it started being conveyed to the public. An idea emerged that those who smoked were shameful, inferior. And today, people even feel ashamed. They smoke in secret, hiding away in a corner. In other words, when we start promoting a certain value, people may not adopt it with full awareness, but they do adopt it. Why don't we turn this into a value? Why don't we start making this something shameful? So that people feel intimidated, hide it, internalize it, and at some point overcome it. It is essential that we develop a social understanding that prejudice is absolutely absurd. It is a symptom of ignorance, rudeness, and primitiveness, so that a person feels like an outcast when engaging in it. And this gradually permeates the collective unconscious. At a certain point, we adopt this stance. Of course, awareness sometimes takes a little longer to develop and take hold. But at the very least, a behavior where people suppress this kind of attitude due to collective influence can be achieved quickly. We have accomplished many things simply through media campaigns and similar efforts. We must adopt a stance where we regard prejudiced behavior as almost subhuman and begin to discourage and shame those who exhibit it. This is a process that I hope will advance within our culture, so that at some point we manage to leave this behind. We have overcome many things throughout human history. Imagine encountering someone today who openly identifies as a supporter of slavery. What would you think? A madman, a madman. Who is this person? They must be out of their mind. But if you look back about 150 years, many who identified that way were considered normal. It was perfectly tolerated. It was something normal. And today, we have managed to make it something absolutely shameful. No one would say such a thing now. May we follow this same path when it comes to prejudice. A journey in which we increasingly assimilate this value, and then internalize this value consciously, because that is how it should be. We must not downplay our responsibility on vindictiveness, or we'll never put an end to it. Therefore, this is very important. Let's not start a war of the sexes, women against men, men against women, a war of races, a war of sexual orientations. Please, let's put an end to this. End it. We must fight against prejudice, not against human beings. Just because one person expresses prejudice does not mean that their entire group is the same. We should not discriminate against an entire group just because one individual made an unfortunate statement. Be careful not to start practicing revenge, because that simply turns prejudice inside out, but it remains prejudice. So, we must have zero tolerance for retaliatory prejudice. Now, I want revenge. I was exploited for a long time. Now I want revenge. This only keeps the machinery of prejudice turning throughout history. I am against prejudice, not against others, not against human beings and their fellow people. This is important. Well discriminate, create new categories to be diminished. We must remain vigilant against this. Because before you even realize it, ask yourself this with complete sincerity. Is there not some category that, to me, holds less value just because it belongs to that category? Do I not have a tendency to discriminate against someone or something? We must recognize this and consciously work towards overcoming our inclination toward prejudice. Always ensuring that I do not feel superior to others, nor consider myself the owner of any absolute truth. Remember Socrates, the great Greek philosopher. I only know that I know nothing. And the Oracle of Delphi declared that he was the wisest man in all of Greece. I only know that I know nothing. I often joke and say that I only know that I know nothing because Socrates said it. Otherwise, I wouldn't even know that. So, people who have a certain level of understanding, a certain stature, know that they do not possess the absolute truth. None at all. Those who shaped history were aware of their limitations. They loved the truth and sought it, but they knew their own limitations. Therefore, not admitting this and believing oneself to be the owner of the truth on it all, encourage a search for deeper values. All superficiality is dangerous and likely to be unjust. Any and all superficiality is potentially prejudiced. When I judge things based on an external veneer, logically, I will be unjust. It is like judging a product by its packaging. I don't know what is inside. It could be a wonderful product or a terrible one. I don't use the product. I judge it by its packaging. We wouldn't do this, but when it comes to human beings, we do. So, there are some small steps, some small observations that we need to make so that we can truly turn this around and leave behind this human tendency. This is something completely atypical for the present day. This should have been left in the past. We should have overcome this a long time ago. May we be the ones who are atypical. Let us remain attentive, then, to these fundamental elements that allow us to always reflect, to always cultivate an inner life, and to not let things of this nature contaminate us. Let us not allow ourselves to be influenced by things as low and as vulgar as judging a person based on superficialities. May we be deeper, may we be more conscious, may we love the truth, may we cherish human values, and may we learn to delve deeper into ourselves, into others, and definitely into life.